on a chilly evening in Coldwater, with mist curling through the old streets. Detective Brian Carter slowed when his headlights swept over a solitary figure. It was a German shepherd, its dark, sleek coat glistening faintly in the fog, standing motionless before an abandoned mansion. In the dim light, its amber eyes burned with an unyielding focus on the rotting wooden door, as if waiting for someone, or guarding something of immense importance. From that moment, Brian knew he had stepped into a story far beyond any case he had ever worked. A story where Otto's silence would lead them through the darkness to uncover a truth that could change everything. But what exactly was hidden behind that door late autumn afternoons in Coldwater carried a strange heaviness, as if the season itself had draped a muted veil over the town. Cold winds swept along the narrow cobblestone streets, scattering brittle yellow leaves across the sidewalks. Above, the sky hung low and gray, stretching the shadows and lending the air an almost dreamlike mystery. The sun's pale light spilled faintly through, casting the earth in a washed blend of gold and cold blue-gray. Each breath from Brian rose in the crisp air, curling into faint clouds before fading away. Brian Carter, a veteran detective with the Coldwater Police Department, steered his patrol car unhurriedly through the hushed streets. More than a decade in the force had exposed him to every shade of human darkness. Yet his instincts and guarded heart remained as sharp as the first day on the job. To Brian, every patrol was an opportunity, sometimes to uncover truths that had waited years to be seen. As the car glided past quiet intersections, its headlights brushed over the weathered stone walls of old houses. Through the window, Brian's keen gaze swept along the narrow back alleys where light rarely reached. Then something in his periphery made him slow. At the far end of the road, shrouded in a thin mist, stood a grand old mansion, once proud, but now left to crumble. The house, long abandoned, bore the marks of time, its walls draped in moss-wooden beams, softened by rot roof tiles, cracked and missing. Dust-coated windows stared blankly into the street. Around it, a ring of leafless trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches still in the wind. Over the years, Brian had heard countless whispers about this place. Strange noises at night, fleeting shadows glimpsed by passing eyes. But never had he stopped to truly look. What drew his attention now was not the mansion itself, but the figure that stood before it. A sable-coated German shepherd with a thick, gleaming coat. The dog wasn't wandering aimlessly like strays often did. There was purpose in its stillness. Otto, that was the name Brian found himself giving in his mind, was fixed on the mansion's decaying wooden door, amber eyes, unblinking. Brian watched transfixed. Otto sat motionless, ears tall, gaze alive, with an intensity that was both alert and measured. There was no whining, no restless pacing, only the focused poise of a sentry awaiting a signal. In that gaze, Brian sensed something unspoken, something urgent. The patrol car's engine hummed softly, but Brian eased it to a stop and rolled down the window. Cold air rushed in, laced with the scent of fallen leaves, damp wood, and the faint musk of a forgotten place. "Hey there, Otto." He called, his voice warm, steady. The dog didn't stir, eyes locked on the door, as if the rest of the world had ceased to matter. A sudden gust rattled the brittle leaves and stirred the tattered curtains behind the windows. A shiver worked its way down Brian's spine, not from the chill, but from the eerie stillness pressing in on the street. Shops were shuttered, the last of the townsfolk vanished behind heavy doors, and the evening wind carried a silence that felt almost deliberate. Brian's gaze lingered on Otto before he finally shifted the car into gear. Yet a strange feeling took root inside him. A sense that this dog was guarding something, something that would reveal itself only to those willing to wait and listen. He would not have to wait long. In only a few steps forward, he would find himself at the threshold of challenges he had never faced before. and Otto would become more than a passing shadow. The dog would be his anchor, his companion through the winter ahead in a story where light and darkness would intertwine. As the car rolled slowly away, Brian's eyes stayed on the lone figure framed by mist and ivy-covered stone. Some encounters happen by chance, others by design. Set in motion by fate and sealed with the kind of loyalty that asks for nothing in return. The cold morning air crept through his coat when he returned later to the old quarter, to that same street where the mansion lay hidden beneath skeletal trees and thick fog. The mist curled around the edges of the walls, parting just enough to reveal patches of moss and faint shafts of light breaking through the branches. And there, exactly where he had left him, was Otto. The German shepherd sat, tall muscles taut beneath his sable coat, every line of his body drawn toward the mansion. His ears were pricked forward, unmoved by the wind, his eyes locked with unwavering precision on the decaying wooden door. Brian studied him closely. The dog's breathing was even, but his focus unbroken. At every rustle or whisper from the street, Otto's head lifted slightly, only to settle back into his silent watch. This was not a dog waiting for an owner to return. This was a guardian with a purpose. Brian had worked with many service dogs over the years, learned to read the subtleties in their stares, their posture, the silent language they spoke. Otto's message was clear. There was something here, something that couldn't be ignored. Pulling over once more, Brian lowered the window and asked softly, "You doing all right, Otto?" The question drifted into the still air unanswered. The dog's gaze didn't falter. It was as if he was waiting for something, or someone, to arrive. Brian exhaled his breath, clouding in the cold, and in that moment he made a quiet promise to himself he would find out what Otto was guarding. He pulled out his phone and quickly typed a few brief notes. Instinct told him that this mansion concealed a secret, something dark, something no one had uncovered, and that Otto was the key to finding it. Brian stepped out of the car, drawing in a lungful of sharp, frigid air, his breath rising in pale clouds that dissolved into the mist. The dog remained perfectly still, his eyes like twin beacons locked on the dust-laden, time-worn facade of the house. He moved closer, studying every detail of Otto's sharp, handsome face, the neat rows of white teeth, the glistening wet nose, catching the faint light of morning, the thick sable coat blending rich browns with deep blacks. That harmony of colors only amplified the impression of strength and loyalty radiating from the German shepherd. A strange calm settled over Brian. Otto was not merely a dog. He was a steadfast companion, ready to face whatever might come. And Brian knew that with Otto beside him, he would never face the coming investigation alone. A sudden gust lifted brittle leaves into a spiraling dance. Otto shifted a paw, a flicker of alertness in his eyes, before he settled once more into unshakable focus. Brian smiled, recognizing that the dog was ready for a long road ahead, and that unwavering gaze would serve as a guiding light in the days to come. He stood silently, taking in the sight of the decaying mansion, a place where beneath the dust of years and the blanket of moss something waited to be unearthed. Inwardly, Brian vowed never to abandon Otto, just as he would never overlook any sign the loyal dog might give him. In his heart, he knew that yesterday's gloomy afternoon had been the first step into a journey where light and shadow would tangle together, where courage and friendship would be tested. Returning to his car, he kept his eyes on Otto until the dog's shape dissolved into the thickening fog. The next day in Coldwater began with a sharp chill and a pale mist curling through the streets. Yet Brian Carter could not erase the image of Otto standing sentinel before the abandoned mansion. A strange compulsion drove him to return to that street again and again, as if watching for some silent signal from his four-legged ally. The first time he came back, Otto was still there, in his familiar corner gaze fixed on the mansion's weathered door. Brian parked a respectful distance away, lowered his window and called softly, "Otto, will you come here?" The dog gave him a brief glance before returning his eyes to the house. No owner, no leash, no collar, only a silent, unwavering presence. Curiosity and concern began to build within Brian. Why would such a devoted dog be here alone? What kept him so firmly rooted to this forsaken place? Brian could feel it. Otto was no stray, no discarded pet. This was a guardian, and what he guarded mattered deeply. That day, Brian spent most of his patrols circling the area, his eyes always finding Otto's silhouette. The dog never left his post, whether under pale sunlight or in a light drizzle. There was a quiet bond forming, an unspoken understanding, woven from patience and mutual watchfulness. Over the following days, Brian paid closer attention to Otto's condition. The shepherd seemed leaner, his coat losing a touch of its luster, a sign of days without care. And yet, in stark contrast to his weary frame, the dog's eyes burned with vitality and resolve. The sight stirred a sharp ache of sympathy in Brian's chest. He also noticed something else. Otto's vigilance sharpened whenever strangers came near the mansion. His ears would rise, muscles tense, his posture protective, as if guarding something sacred. When Brian approached, however, the dog remained calm, observant, quietly measuring him. The thought of Otto being out here without shelter weighed heavily on Brian. He couldn't allow this loyal creature to stand alone in hardship, especially if he was in the midst of some crucial mission. He decided to begin digging into the dog's past. He searched through animal rescue records, checked with nearby police stations, and spoke to locals, but no one knew Otto or his owner. The silence around the dog only deepened Brian's conviction that Otto needed both watching over and trusting. On many late afternoons, Brian would sit quietly in his car, watching Otto by the old mansion. What he felt was more than a bond between man and dog. It was a connection between two souls holding their ground against whatever shadows lay ahead. Otto's presence became a living reminder of the power of loyalty and perseverance, values so easily overlooked in a chaotic world. In the days that followed, Brian became Otto's silent companion, keeping enough distance not to intrude, yet close enough to follow every step. Otto remained the same, still steady with a gaze anchored to something beyond sight, as though waiting for a sign from Brian and from the wider world. Brian found himself wondering what lay behind those unwavering eyes. What secrets could only be reached through patience and courage? And could it be that Otto himself was the key to bringing the truth to light? One thing was certain. Since meeting Otto, no day in Coldwater had been ordinary. The monotony of patrols had shifted into something purposeful, measured steps toward unraveling a mystery quietly taking shape. And so the once bleak afternoons of Coldwater had transformed. They were no longer hours of mere shadow and fog, but of steady eyes, certain footsteps, and a wordless bond between a man and a dog. One that might just change everything. The morning at the Coldwater Police Department began with the shrill ring of phones and the brisk, restless rhythm of a small town that never truly slept. After days of quietly observing Otto beside the abandoned mansion, Brian Carter stepped into the briefing room, carrying a mixture of curiosity and resolve. It was time to share what he had seen and what he had felt with the colleagues who stood beside him in the pursuit of truth. Before him sat a table of seasoned detectives and officers, faces lined with experience, eyes sharp and ready to weigh every word. Brian began by recounting each detail of Otto. The German shepherd with an unwavering gaze and a stillness unlike any stray he had ever known. He spoke of how the dog never looked away from the weathered old house, how there was no sign of an owner, yet an unmistakable sense that Otto was guarding something sacred, something that mattered. The room listened in silence at first, curiosity flickering into cautious suspicion. A few officers recalled the rumors, Stories of a haunted house long abandoned, of strange noises in the night and fleeting shadows in the windows. But no one had dared to go near it, much less investigate. Brian went on. I don't believe Otto is just an abandoned dog. I think that house hides something dark, something no one's uncovered yet. But without hard evidence, we don't have a search warrant or the grounds for a full-scale investigation. A grizzled detective named Coleman leaned forward. Brian, what makes you so sure dogs have instincts? Yes, but how can you be certain Otto's behavior means something specific? Brian nodded, his voice steady with the weight of experience. I've worked with canine units for years. The way this dog fixes his attention on a single point unmoved by rain, wind, or passers-by. That's the posture of a dog detecting danger or something unusual. Not every dog can hold that kind of focus. The discussion grew livelier, theories exchanged across the table. Some suggested finding out who had last owned the property, checking land records, or speaking with residents who might have seen something. Others proposed setting up a discreet watch on the house. Brian noted each idea, feeling both the pressure and the rising hope. Every step forward could bring them closer to the truth, to the light buried deep in the shadows of that mansion. But the weight of time pressed on them. Without legal grounds, the search could be delayed, and in delay, danger might be festering unseen. In the end, the team agreed on a plan. Rotating shifts to watch both the mansion and Otto, documenting every change, every detail. And above all, they would not leave Otto alone. Brian's conviction that the dog was the key to this mystery had begun to spread. In the hallways and on patrols, the story of the loyal dog and the abandoned mansion began to pass from one officer to another. There was a shared sense of urgency now, and Brian's quiet persistence, mirrored in Otto's steady watch, was becoming a source of motivation. Leaving the meeting, Brian carried the image of Otto with him, standing firm against the fog. We'll bring the light to that place, he vowed silently. Whatever waits inside, whatever danger lies ahead, Otto and I will face it together. That cold afternoon in Coldwater rolled on. But inside Brian and his team burned a fire stronger than the chill. The questions were sharpening, the signs aligning, and the hunt for answers had only just begun. By the time the morning light had barely stretched across Coldwater, Brian was already at the desk of the lead investigator, where stacks of files lay in uneven towers. It was time to act. With suspicion mounting around the mansion and Otto's steadfast vigil, Brian knew the next move had to be securing a search warrant. The only way to step inside the shadows and find what was hidden there. He sat down, opened his laptop, and began to draft the request. Each word was deliberate, each sentence anchored in the observations the team had gathered. The unexplained presence of Otto, the strange consistency of his behavior, the long-abandoned house that seemed to breathe secrecy. Every line was crafted to convince the court there was enough to justify the search. But procedure was never simple. Brian knew the process would involve multiple layers of review. Questions from superiors, scrutiny from legal counsel, the watchful eyes of judges determined to uphold the law. Without direct, tangible evidence, the hurdle would be high. And as days edged forward, he felt the strain of waiting. Outside, Otto still stood guard, enduring rain, wind, or sharp winter sun, never stepping away from his post. Brian feared that the longer they waited, the greater the risk that whatever or whoever was trapped inside might run out of time. Still, his belief in Otto never wavered. His years alongside K9 partners had taught him that a dog's instincts could cut through the fog faster than any theory. Otto was not simply an animal. He was a partner, a guardian, and perhaps the only light willing to stand unblinking against the deepening dark of Coldwater. During the long wait for the warrant's approval, Brian refused to sit idle. With his team, he gathered more information, spoke to residents in the surrounding streets, and kept a constant watch on Otto's behavior. Every movement, every glance from the German shepherd was recorded with precision, each note becoming another fragment in the growing picture of the mansion and the secrets that might be buried inside. The greater the pressure, the heavier the weight on Brian's shoulders. He knew this was no longer just about cracking a case or uncovering evidence. It was about the possible lives of children who might be trapped behind those walls. Every passing moment was precious, and he intended to use every second to prepare for the confrontation that lay ahead. Finally, after days of waiting, the search warrant came through. Holding the signed document in his hands, Brian felt a surge of relief mixed with a sharper edge of resolve. Plans were drawn up swiftly, tasks assigned, equipment checked. He reminded his team of the potential dangers they were walking into, urging absolute caution once inside. Before they set out, Brian took a moment to look at Otto, still with that same unwavering gaze. "We're about to step into the dark," he murmured. "But with you beside me, I believe we'll see it through to the light." Otto responded with a brief calm glance, as if passing back a quiet strength. The journey began with that shared conviction, carrying both hope and determination toward the silent, decaying mansion, toward the truth waiting in its shadows. The patrol convoy rolled slowly along a street littered with dry leaves, heading for the mansion that loomed at the far end of Coldwater's old quarter. The afternoon light had begun to fade, stretching long shadows across the ground, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Inside the lead car, Brian kept one hand on the wheel, eyes fixed on Otto. The shepherd stood alert beside him, posture steady, ears pricked, gaze locked on the moss-covered structure ahead. When they stopped just short of the gate, the team disembarked, the weight of the atmosphere pressing in immediately. The air was thick with the scent of damp, rotting wood and wet leaves scattered across the neglected yard. Silence hung heavily, broken only by the occasional creak of metal in the wind. Brian pushed the rusted gate open, its groan echoing between the walls. Otto moved to the front, leading the team across the overgrown path and into the house's darkened threshold. The hallway swallowed them in shadow, their flashlights sweeping across peeling paint, rough plaster, and dust layered thick from years of abandonment. Their footsteps sounded hollow on the warped wooden floorboards, mingling with the steady rhythm of controlled breathing. Every heart in the group beat a little faster. The stillness here was unnatural, oppressive, as though the house itself was listening. Brian's eyes darted toward the shut doors lining the corridor. Rusted locks, aged bolts, and here and there faint scratch marks, signs of doors forced open or slammed shut more than once. His grip on the flashlight tightened. Otto's nose skimmed the floor, pausing at intervals, ears twitching toward faint sounds unseen. Now and then he let out a low, deliberate growl, a warning Brian had learned to trust. Step by step, the dog was drawing them closer to something. A faint thud came from the far end of the hall, like knuckles brushing a wooden panel. Brian halted, eyes narrowing, beam cutting into the shadows. No one spoke. The silence felt alive. He approached a larger door, its paint flaking, the lock still firm but scored with fresh scratches. Otto stepped ahead, pressing a paw against the wood claws, rasping lightly. Brian touched the cold surface and felt it, just barely, a subtle tremor. His pulse quickened. Behind this door could be the answer to everything, or a danger they could not yet name. A voice behind him whispered, "What do you think, Brian?" Without looking away, he answered, "We're about to enter a place no one ever wanted to see. And Otto is the only one who can lead us there." Signs began to emerge. Small but undeniable scraps of fabric among the dust, an old toy lying abandoned in the yard. Faint, wet footprints too small to belong to an adult. The house was whispering of life inside. Each step deeper felt like the beat of a drum, each sound magnified in the charged silence. Otto led without a bark, guiding with eyes and instinct alone. The further they moved, the tighter the air seemed to press in walls, drawing closer, as the mansion transformed into something less like a building and more like a maze. A place where life and death felt separated by only a breath. Brian looked to Otto, seeing in the dog's eyes a promise. Unshakable loyalty, the will to protect, and the certainty of purpose. This was the moment when trust in his four-legged partner mattered more than anything else. Their first steps into the mansion's mystery had been taken. Ahead lay a road far more perilous than any they had known before. And in the flickering light of their flashlights, the decaying walls seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the truth to finally come to light. Otto stopped before a solid wooden door. Its paint long faded with the years, the lock bound tight by layers of rusted metal. The dog lifted his head high, breath quick and steady, eyes burning with absolute focus. Brian felt the shift immediately. This was no random pause. Something behind that door was a crucial part of the mansion's secret. "This is it," Brian murmured, his voice low, a mixture of calm and anticipation. He signaled the team to hold position, preparing lock-breaking tools and backup lights. Otto tapped the door gently with his paw, each motion deliberate as if testing their resolve. After a tense effort, the lock gave way, and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow, dark passage stretching deep into the earth. The air was thick with mold, laced with a chill that bit at the skin. Brian stepped forward cautiously, his flashlight beam gliding over the rough brick walls. On the dusty floor, small footprints were stamped deep into the grime. Otto led the way, each step measured nose sweeping the ground for the scent of life. Suddenly he froze, his eyes locking on an odd section of wall. Part of it didn't match the rest. Brian moved closer, brushing his hand against a panel of wood, fitted so precisely it concealed a false doorway. The find tightened the air around them. Everyone knew they were moving deeper into a deliberately constructed labyrinth built to hide something terrible. Brian met Otto's gaze, trust clear in his eyes. "You lead. I'll follow." The passage wound onward, splitting into forks and corridors barred by locked doors. The team moved carefully. Homemade traps were everywhere, wires stretched low across the floor, wooden braces rigged to trigger collapses, and rotted planks ready to give way under a misstep. Otto's low whines pulled their attention away from danger more than once. Brian felt the weight of each step. Every movement carried the thin edge between progress and disaster. They began opening doors, one by one, revealing cramped rooms that spoke of captivity, tattered blankets, a few worn toys, traces of survival clinging to the darkness. The air was stale, heavy with hopelessness. The tension in the group grew sharper. Brian could see it in their faces. Curiosity was giving way to dread. This was no ordinary abandoned house. It was part of a network designed to imprison the smallest, most defenseless lives. Scratches on the doors, strange markings scrawled on walls, tiny footprints, and faint breaths that seemed to drift through the corridor. All told a story of fear and endurance. Brian knelt, touching a scrap of cloth no larger than a child's scarf, and felt his chest tighten. Somewhere in this darkness, children were waiting. Otto pressed on his amber eyes, seeming to glow in the shadows. He moved with a quiet certainty, the kind that came from knowing his role. To be the light in this blackness, to guide Brian and the rescue team without faltering. Minutes stretched long, every sense sharpened, as they prepared for the dangers ahead. Brian knew they were on the brink of a rescue, unlike any they had faced. Every door they opened could bring them closer to the truth, or into the deepest shadows of human cruelty. The underground air stayed heavy and silent, broken only by the soft footsteps of the police and the steady breathing of Otto. Stepping past a decayed wooden doorway, they entered another narrow passage. This one widened into a long, low-ceilinged tunnel. The damp stone walls caught the flashlight beams in broken reflections, making shapes that danced like ghosts in the dark. The smell of mold and earth was suffocating the chill, sinking deep with each breath. Water covered the floor, rising to their ankles, each step sending small ripples outward. The cold seeped through their boots, weighing their movements. The slick stone made every stride a gamble. One misstep could cause noise or injury. Brian's focus stayed sharp. What concerned him most were the subtle traces of more traps. Tripwires hidden beneath the water-loose planks set to flip when stepped on, and fragile boards that could collapse without warning. Otto moved with extraordinary care, nose low, scenting each patch of water and debris. Whenever he detected a submerged wire or unstable footing, he gave a quiet whine, pulling the team's attention to the hazard. In that dim, airless tunnel, the partnership between man and dog became their anchor. Brian stayed close to Otto, scanning each detail, trusting the shepherd's instincts as much as his own. Otto could sense what human senses missed. When a rotted section of flooring sagged dangerously, Otto stopped instantly, eyes locking on Brian in silent warning. Brian understood at once, signaling for the team to change course, steering them towards safer ground. A collective breath of relief passed through the group. Their four-legged guide had spared them a costly mistake. What struck Brian most was Otto's calm and unshakable patience throughout the journey. In the damp, cold, and dangerous darkness, the dog never once showed fear or haste. That steadiness seemed to flow into the rest of the team, lending them a quiet strength that held them together as they pressed forward. More than once, Brian and Otto worked in perfect harmony to overcome hazards. When a suspended wooden beam threatened to fall, Otto nudged it aside with a careful paw, while Brian swiftly reset the safety props to prevent an accident. These moments revealed more than skill. They showed an unspoken bond, a trust so deep it needed no words. At a waterlogged junction, Brian paused, glancing at Otto. "What do you see, Otto?" he asked quietly. The dog hesitated only for a breath before stepping in the direction Brian indicated, guiding them into a section of the passage no one had ever explored, where the mansion's darkest secrets might still be waiting. With every doorway they crossed, with every shadow swept by the flashlight's beam, the pressure on Brian's chest grew heavier. They were winding deeper into a maze of truth, each moment poised to reveal either a vital discovery or a lurking threat. No matter the obstacles, Brian and Otto advanced without wavering, driven by a single conviction. They weren't only chasing mysteries in these hidden rooms, they were fighting for the lives of children whose silent cries echoed in the dark. The waterlogged tunnel was no longer just a barrier. It had become proof of the team's grit and endurance. Every droplet tapping against the floor, every labored breath from the rescuers merged with the steady beat of hope that drove them onward. Brian looked down at Otto, meeting those amber eyes full of trust and courage. A faint smile touched his lips as he thought, "Thank you, Otto. You're not alone. We'll break this darkness together." The underground passages grew narrower, the air heavier. The team pressed deeper into the mansion's buried labyrinth, flashlight beams, slipping through cracks to reveal jagged walls and fresh scratches on the rotting floorboards. Everyone understood that each step carried a cost, and every passing moment could alter the fate of the children they sought to save. When they emerged from a narrow corridor, a decaying wooden staircase loomed ahead. Its steps warped and splintered, the frame shuddering with each touch. Brian led the way, testing each tread, his senses alive to the danger. Then came the sharp crack of breaking wood. Vargas, one of the team, felt the planks give way beneath him before anyone could react. In an instant, the staircase collapsed, a crash of splintering timber and a cry of pain reverberating through the confined space. Brian spun around, his pulse spiking at the sight of Vargas lying motionless in the wreckage. Silence held for a beat before the man's ragged breathing broke it. Brian rushed to him, skirting the debris, and knelt at his side. A deep gash marred Vargas's leg, blood soaking into the dust. The others moved fast, pulling him free and radioing in the emergency. The accident thickened the tension in the air. Fear and worry flickered in every face. But no one let it turn to retreat. Otto stood steady beside Brian, eyes alight as if lending him resolve. "We can't stop," Brian said, his tone firm but steady. "The children are in there. No matter what, we keep going." The collapsed staircase was more than an obstacle. It was a grim reminder of the danger around them, a warning that time was slipping away. Brian felt the full weight of his role to save the captives and to keep every member of his team alive. Otto's keen instincts stayed sharp, his soft warning whines drawing attention to unseen hazards. He and Brian moved as one, while Brian coordinated the team's safe passage. Otto scouted ahead, avoiding unstable ground and marking locked doors or suspicious details. With teamwork and caution, they rigged a safe way past the broken stairwell, Brian constantly urging calm and precision. His gaze often returned to Otto, the fearless partner who seemed to give the entire group their momentum. The minutes bled into hours, pressure building with each turn of the labyrinth. Brian could hear the strained breathing of his team, sense the fatigue threading through them. But there could be no turning back. Every effort, every risk had one purpose: to bring light to the children trapped in this dark place. After hours of navigating dangers, the rescue team pushed on their persistence, like Otto's, becoming a living emblem of courage. Reaching another heavy wooden door, Brian met Otto's eyes. Whatever lay ahead, he knew it would be harder still. But with this bond of trust and determination, they would not quit. The air in the underground chamber grew thick, the tension almost physical. Their footsteps echoed on the cold concrete, mingling with the shallow, fearful cries of children hidden somewhere close. Brian, his team, and Otto pressed deeper into the shadows, searching every corner, speaking softly to comfort each small, trembling life they found, fighting to lead them out of fear and into the safety of the light. Yet panic and exhaustion made it hard for many of the children to remain calm. Some, terrified by the unfamiliar voices and sounds, bolted into narrow cracks, tiny courtyards, or pitch-black rooms where no light reached. These cramped, tangled spaces turned the search into a painstaking challenge. From somewhere in the shadows, Brian caught the faint sound of crying. His flashlight swept across scarred walls and rotting wooden doors. His focus tightening instantly. One child had strayed deeper into the maze, lost among the dark and dangerous corridors. "I've got crying." Left side, a team member called urgently over the radio. Brian swung his beam in that direction, and Otto surged forward, nose to the ground, sifting the air for scent. The shepherd stopped at a slim gap between two walls, sniffing intently before letting out a soft whine. A signal he had found the trail. Hope and worry collided in Brian's chest as he and the others closed in. There in the dim fringe of the corridor's light, the flashlight revealed a small boy's face. Hair, matted eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. He hugged himself tight, trembling, trying to quiet his sobs, but unable to stop them entirely. Brian crouched low, voice gentle. "It's all right. We're here to help you." The boy's tearful eyes lifted toward him, then slowly, cautiously, he stepped toward the warm circle of the rescue team's light. Otto moved closer, allowing the child's small hands to sink into his thick, warm fur, offering a wordless promise of safety. Otto's timely intervention not only saved the boy, but lit a spark of hope in the cold darkness. Brian exhaled slowly, knowing that this bond between man and dog was working quiet miracles. But there was no time to linger. Other children were still missing in the underground maze. The team reorganized quickly, splitting into smaller groups to comb through every cramped room and narrow passage. Signs of the children's desperate attempts to hide surfaced again and again. Torn scraps of cloth, tiny footprints in the dust, the echo of quickened breathing from the deepest recesses of the cellar. Otto pressed on tirelessly, scenting every crevice, each discovery bringing Brian in close to direct the team where they were needed most. When Otto caught another trace, a faint cry from the farthest, darkest end of a hallway, The entire team froze in tense silence. Brian urged them forward careful steps, carrying them toward the sound. They found another cluster of children huddled in a shadowed corner, faces etched with worry and fatigue. Brian knelt to each in turn, speaking softly to calm them. Otto stepped forward, brushing against their hands and shoulders, offering quiet reassurance. One by one, the children were carried from the darkness into the arms of the rescuers. Every fragile smile, every glimmer of renewed hope reminded Brian and his team why they were here. The episode of the lost boy and Otto's role in finding him stood as living proof of the power in the partnership between humans and their canine allies. Brian knew that even a second's hesitation or a single wrong turn could have ended in tragedy. Time pressed hard now. The team worked at their highest pace, driven by the same force that kept Brian moving. Unshaken faith in Otto and an unyielding determination to bring every child to safety. The mission was far from over. Greater challenges lay ahead. But with Otto beside him and the team united, Brian believed the light at the end of this tunnel would come. The flooded passage stretched on beneath the mansion, water icy and rising to Brian's knees. Droplets pattered from the ceiling into the stagnant pools, their rhythm joining the steady breathing of the team in a tense soundtrack to the gloom. At the final fork, Brian's flashlight quivered against the murky surface. From beyond a decayed wooden door came the faint cry of another trapped child. His breath quickened. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Without pause, he shrugged off his jacket and stepped into the frigid water. Each step was a battle against the cold, gnawing through fabric to the bone. But his resolve stayed ironclad. There was no turning back. Otto remained at his side, gaze fixed on Brian, the embodiment of unwavering loyalty. The dog's presence fed Brian's strength, pushing him forward toward the life that waited in the dark. The corridor narrowed, the water deepening, jagged stone crowding the walls. Brian steadied himself with outstretched arms against the rough, wet surface. His beams skimmed the rippling waterlight and shadow, dancing together in eerie beauty. Then, clearer, closer, the child's cry swelled. Brian quickened his pace, the freezing water splashing high, while Otto barked once, not in alarm, but in fierce urgency. At last they reached the cell door. The wood was swollen heavy and crumbling beneath his grip. Sweat chilled on his skin as he forced it open. The flashlight's glow fell upon a small boy, hair-tangled eyes glistening with tears, yet still holding a spark of life. Brian stepped inside, lowering himself to the boy's height. His voice was steady, warm. "You're safe now. I'm here to get you out." The child clung to his jacket, trembling, but his gaze brightened as though he had found the anchor he needed. Otto stepped forward quietly, lying beside the boy and gently licking his hand, the gesture carrying both comfort and protection. In that moment, every member of the team felt the quiet, almost sacred power of friendship and loyalty. Brian lifted the boy into his arms, moving with care through the flooded corridor, each step steady, his gaze flicking often to the dog, who never looked away from them. They advanced toward the light, Brian's heart pounding with the knowledge that every second now was a second of life reclaimed. On the way back, Brian couldn't tear his eyes from Otto, the tireless, unwavering companion who held his composure even in the harshest moments. He knew it was Otto's presence that had kept him steady, lending him strength he might not have found alone. The team was awash in emotion and renewed hope. Every step through the dark passage no longer felt like a march into fear, but the beginning of new life. Brian knew other children still needed them, and it would be the power of perseverance that would carry them through the trials ahead. The rescue of the trapped child was more than a victory for justice. It was proof of a deep bond between human and animal, a connection that transcended limits. The pale gold beams of their flashlights pushed back the suffocating darkness of the mansion's underground warren. Brian, the police team, and Otto moved deeper into the labyrinth, following the smallest traces that might lead them to the children still imprisoned. Each group they found was like a flare of hope in the heavy curtain of despair. The children were scattered through makeshift room, each bearing the marks of exhaustion, hunger, and a terror that had etched itself into their faces. Their eyes were dull from fear, yet flickered faintly with hope as the rescuers approached. Brian knelt before each one, meeting their gaze and murmuring, "We're here to take you home. You're safe now." His gentle voice seemed to soothe their fractured spirits. The smallest ones crept from the shadows, some clinging tightly to one another, as if they were the only solid ground in a sea of fear. Otto became an indispensable part of the mission. He approached each child slowly, allowing small hands to press into his thick, warm coat. His amber eyes held them in an unspoken promise of safety. Even the most frightened found some measure of peace in the dog's quiet presence. A little girl, clutching a tattered teddy bear, still had tears in her eyes, but when Otto's tongue brushed her hand, a small smile broke through. The sight filled Brian with a deep, stirring emotion. Life itself was waiting to be rescued. Each group of children was led up the underground stairs, feeling daylight on their faces for the first time in days. Sighs of relief mingled with soft sobs and shy laughter like fragile new blossoms breaking through the dark. Medical staff moved quickly to check each child, wrapping them in warm blankets and pressing hot drinks into their hands. Weary as they were, their eyes now held a spark, an awakening hunger to live. Otto never strayed far, pacing gentle circles, sniffing and watching with quiet vigilance. Brian recognized the dog's role was more than practical. He was a steadfast anchor for wounded spirits. Moments like these, repeated again and again, every time a child was found, every time a tear turned into a smile. The team knew they were not just breaking physical chains, but giving these children strength to keep walking forward. Brian and Otto worked in seamless rhythm. As Brian comforted and reassured Otto, stood close the silent friend, offering warmth without words. The rescue was not just about survival. It was about returning humanity to those who had almost lost it. Looking into the wide, uncertain eyes and small hands clutching blankets, Brian felt a surge of conviction. The road to healing would be long, but with every small step, every spark of trust, light would spread and hold. The operation moved slowly, but with meticulous care. Each child was brought up, examined, and accounted for. None would be left behind. Brian and Otto searched every room, every corner, until they were certain all were safe. Otto's gaze followed each child as if promising that his loyalty and vigilance would never falter. Brian knew the shepherd had become more than a partner. He was the light guiding them through this trial. But the air underground thickened again as they pressed deeper into the maze. Each footstep echoed off the cold concrete like a drumbeat of urgency, heralding the confrontation they could no longer avoid. From a darkened corner, a figure lunged forward, face twisted in rage. This was the captor. The one behind the horrors, the man who had kept children in the shadows of his cruelty. In his hand was a long metal bar, gleaming with a cold edge, his eyes full of bloodlust and hate. The scene erupted in an instant. The captors shouted, striking with violent speed to block the rescuers. The team drew their weapons, forming a protective ring around Brian and Otto. The clash of metal shouts, Brahma shouts, and rapid footsteps roared through the confined space. Brian held his ground. In perfect sync with Otto, his ever-present partner, he matched each shift and strike of the attacker. Otto lunged, using his strength and speed to close the distance, cutting off the captor's most dangerous blows before they could land. In a swift counter, Brian slipped past a vicious swing and shouted to his team, "Protect the kids! Close in." Instantly, the rescuers tightened their defensive circle, ready for any sudden strike. Otto, all muscle and resolve, lunged at the attacker, clamping down with his powerful jaws and holding him fast. His bark thundered through the narrow space, a warning to the guilty and a rallying cry for the rescuers. Brian seized the opening, moving in with controlled precision, his martial skill and determination driving him forward. The captor fought back hard, each second of the clash a knife's edge for the fate of the children waiting beyond. Flashlight beams swept over taut faces, steady hands, and the seamless rhythm between man and dog. Brian could feel the strength of their partnership in every movement. As long as they didn't falter, the light would find its way through the dark. The fight raged down the cramped underground hall, the sound echoing off damp brick walls. Every move between Brian and Otto was calculated, ensuring no child nearby would be harmed. In a decisive moment, Otto leapt, throwing his weight into the captor and forcing him back, giving Brian just enough space to snap the handcuffs over the man's wrists. The criminal thrashed, but the resolve and unity of the team broke his will. Breathing hard, Brian straightened his eyes, still fierce. He reached down to run his hand through Otto's thick coat. "We did it, Otto. But we're not done yet." Their flawless teamwork was more than proof of friendship and loyalty. It was a living emblem of unshakable belief in justice and life itself. But the man shackled in the corridor suddenly jerked hard against the cuffs. The metal strained, then gave just enough for him to twist free and bolt into the tunnel's heavy dark. The underground was a wall of black, swallowing sound and sight, hiding every trace in its depths. Brian didn't hesitate. He ordered the team to split up, sealing off side passages to cut off the fugitive's escape. He and Otto took the lead, following the man's trail, their flashlights slicing through the dark like thin blades of light. Otto's nose found the damp, muddied footprints against the cold earth. He led Brian through sharp turns and tight corridors no ordinary person would navigate at speed. The rhythm of pounding footsteps, ragged breaths, and Brian's racing heart built into a symphony of tension. The air in the tunnels was dense, each breath clouding in the cold. The beams of their flashlights could only peel back a fragment of the blackness, leaving the unknown lurking in every corner. The fugitive moved fast, darting through narrow gaps, twisting passages, and shadowed alcoves to shake pursuit. He used every turn, every obstacle. Splintered boards, toppled crates, abandoned debris, to slow the chase. Brian stayed on comms, directing the other groups, keeping their formation tight. Sweat chilled his back, adrenaline roaring in his veins. Every sense was stretched to its limit. Ahead, Otto pressed on with relentless drive, every instinct sharpened to a point. His amber eyes flashed in the dark, each bark and shake of his head a precise signal for Brian to adjust course. The chase twisted through a maze of intersecting corridors where light and shadow tangled. From time to time, a sound would halt them, a scrape, a breath, and the team would listen in tense stillness before pressing forward again. Brian refused to ease his pace. In his mind were the children still trapped, Otto's unwavering gaze, and a promise that no one would be left in this darkness. Every step was a vow, every breath a commitment to life. A sudden sound ahead warned him the fugitive might be setting a trap or preparing to mislead them. He signaled Otto to stay alert, the team tightening up as they advanced. The shepherd reacted instantly, bounding to a weathered wooden door. Light from Brian's beam slipped through a crack, catching the flicker of movement inside. Brian's breath stilled. He was face to face with the criminal's hiding place. In that frozen moment, every detail mattered. The breath in the air, the shift of a foot, the locked exchange between man and dog. It was the key to forcing light into this pocket of darkness. The tunnel seemed to close in the walls' swallowing sound. Brian and Otto drove forward, boots striking the cold concrete in time with the quick, desperate footfalls ahead. Every stretch of corridor held the risk of an unseen threat, but Otto's steadiness and sharp instincts carried the team safely through. The fugitive tore ahead at full speed, darting through shortcuts and bends, weaving between broken timbers. Fallen crates and rusted remnants meant to slow pursuit. Otto surged to the front, agile and tireless, glued to the scent. Not a detail escaped him. His nose brushed the ground, claws scraping against the damp wall, as he took each sharp corner, closing the gap step by step. Brian ran close alongside his gaze, never leaving his steadfast companion, the beam of his flashlight flickering against the grim gray walls, casting shifting ghosts across the darkness. Each taut breath mingled with the damp air, making his heartbeat thud with urgent rhythm. Suddenly, the kidnapper veered sharply into a narrower passageway, lower, tighter, and more suffocating than before. He seemed convinced that the twisting terrain would grant him an escape. But Otto had no intention of allowing that. The German shepherd seized every opening, leaping over piles of debris, plunging through waist-deep water, crossing rotting planks that sagged under his weight. Each movement a display of raw strength and unyielding resolve. Brian saw boundless power in every stride, his trust in the four-legged partner deepening with every second. The kidnapper was weary, but forced himself to keep pace. He had not expected that his pursuer would be not only an experienced detective, but also a dog with primal survival instincts and extraordinary persistence. When the tunnel widened into a small open space, the man lunged for a rickety wooden staircase leading upward. But Otto was already closing in, surging forward at astonishing speed. With precision and force, the shepherd slammed into him, knocking him off balance and sending him crashing onto the cold concrete. A volley of sharp barks erupted, a clear signal to Brian's team that the decisive moment had come. Brian rushed in, moving in perfect sync with Otto to subdue and restrain the fugitive. Each motion, firm, measured, exact, was a testament to their hard-earned unity. The kidnapper could no longer resist. He slumped under their combined strength, eyes wide with panic and a dawning hopelessness. Brian exhaled a surge of unnameable relief welling inside him. A liberation not just for the children, but for himself and the loyal dog at his side. In that instant, the beam of the flashlight lit Otto's face, his amber eyes blazing with a faith and strength that could not be dimmed. Brian knew it was persistence, courage, and an unshakable bond that had driven them to overcome the darkness. The dim glow of flashlights and the pale beams from ambulance headlights mingled with the chill of the underground air. After hours of tense pursuit, Brian and the rescue team prepared to bring the last of the children out of that shadowed prison. Each child was carried gently in protective arms, their small faces still trembling, their eyes clouded with the fear and bewilderment of too many days in captivity. Yet beneath it all flickered the fragile light of freedom and the slow return of safety. Brian crouched to speak softly to each one, his words like a soothing rain easing wounds of the spirit. Otto stayed close, quiet yet constant, an unspoken comfort. Each gentle lick of a hand or nudge of his muzzle eased the flinches and lingering panic. Tears began to mingle with small, hesitant laughter. The children's eyes grew brighter, their frail bodies slowly recovering within the circle of care formed by rescuers and medics. Brian watched as each was tended to with meticulous kindness. Blood pressure checked, temperatures taken, wounds dressed, and warm water offered. The weight of exhaustion and long-held fear seemed to lift under the light and steady compassion surrounding them. The children were dressed in warm clothes, offered soft food, and wrapped in thick blankets. The sight softened the sharp edges of the night, filling it with warmth and hope. Brian looked at Otto, gratitude filling his gaze. The shepherd was not just a partner. He was the embodiment of persistence, of wordless love for these children. Brian knew that it was Otto's strength and constancy that had carried them to this moment. Joy bloomed through the team. There were embraces, trembling smiles, gentle voices, and eyes brimming with thanks that warmed everyone's hearts. Brian felt the deep connection between people and animals, between the brave and the fragile souls freed from the dark. Around them, every sound, every breath, every glimmer of light seemed to join in the celebration, affirming that life always finds a way to triumph, even in the blackest places. Brian stood quietly, watching each child leave the dungeon, his heart a tide of emotion. Part awe, part pride, wholly thankful. In the flickering light, ambulances and patrol cars lined up to take the children to safety. Brian and Otto stepped close to each one, as if to affirm, "Here you are protected and cherished." At the final moment, when the last child crossed the threshold of the cold, empty chamber, Brian and Otto stood by the closing iron door, eyes meeting in silent understanding. They had crossed the trial together, bringing life and light to the smallest, most vulnerable hearts. A ripple of soft applause came from the rescue team. The laughter of children slowly overtook the remnants of crying, weaving a new harmony of joy and hope. In Brian's chest, peace settled, a victory steeped in humanity. Soon after, news of the rescue of 23 children from the abandoned Coldwater mansion spread through the town, stirring the community to its core. The harrowing truth of their captivity, the shadows they had endured, and the unyielding courage of Detective Brian and Otto became the heartbeat of conversations in homes, cafes, and quiet street corners. The people of Coldwater, long accustomed to tranquil days, now stood awake to a bitter reality, but also to a rising hope. They gathered, sharing thoughts and surging emotions, united by a determination to protect and help the wounded children find their way back to life. Social organizations in the town quickly took action, launching programs to provide psychological support, medical care, and essential supplies for the children who had just been rescued. Meetings and workshops on preventing child abuse were held more frequently, drawing large participation from locals and experts alike. The love and care shown to the children became a flame burning brightly in the hearts of everyone. During the gratitude ceremonies that followed, Brian and Otto received heartfelt honors from the community. Brian, with his composure, courage, and sense of responsibility, was seen as a symbol of justice and bravery. Otto, the loyal and valiant German shepherd, was awarded special titles, becoming an irreplaceable hero in the town story. Plaques of recognition were erected in the town square, each featuring an image of Otto standing firmly beside Brian, his eyes bright with determination and loyalty. Visitors came to pay their respects, leaving words of gratitude as a way to affirm the power of human kindness and the deep bond between man and dog. This event not only changed public awareness about protecting children, but also sparked unprecedented unity, igniting a stronger community spirit than ever before. Families, schools, and social organizations began working closely together, building sustainable support networks to safeguard and nurture future generations. Brian and Otto continued to serve as living symbols of Coldwater, embodiments of perseverance, bravery, and the power of connection. They were not just heroes of the rescue. They became a source of inspiration for people to live with more kindness and compassion. Under the shimmering lights of the ceremony, Brian looked at Otto and smiled. He knew their journey was far from over. New challenges still lay ahead. But with this trust and companionship, every shadow could be driven away. Every cry for help would be answered. After days of tension, darkness, and danger, Brian and Otto finally had moments of peace together. The skies over Coldwater grew clearer, with soft golden sunlight filtering through the trees and stretching across the path to Brian's cozy home. The fresh air carried the gentle scent of wildflowers and damp earth after a light rain, washing away every trace of fatigue and fear. Brian sat on the porch steps, his gaze resting on the horizon, a rare and cherished calm filling his heart. Otto curled up beside him, amber eyes half closed, his warm, sleek fur radiating quiet comfort. That warmth seeped into Brian's soul, easing the weight of the past days. No words were needed. The bond between Brian and Otto transcended language. Every gentle lick to the hand, every playful nudge of the muzzle was a silent message of loyalty and unwavering friendship. Brian could feel Otto's steady protective presence, a friend who never left his side, a companion through every trial. He ran a hand slowly along Otto's thick fur, his eyes filled with gratitude, respect, and deep affection. He remembered the hardest moments. When Otto charged fearlessly into danger, when the dog led him through the pitch-black corridors, and when he quietly shielded the children without a hint of hesitation. The connection between them was not just that of a detective and his canine partner. It was a profound bond between two kindred spirits, a wordless understanding built on absolute trust. Otto was not merely a partner in the field. He was a brother, a friend, an inseparable part of Brian's life. As the evening sky turned shades of soft pink and violet, Brian and Otto rose together, walking along the narrow path behind the house. The crunch of dry leaves beneath their feet blended with the steady rhythm of their breathing, creating a peaceful harmony between nature and the sincerity of their bond. Brian thought of the journey they had just endured, the grueling challenges, the moments on the edge of danger, and above all, Otto's courage in bringing light into the darkness and hope to the children. He knew that no matter the difficulties ahead, their bond would remain the strength that carried them through. Otto glanced up at Brian, his eyes gleaming as if to say, "We've come a long way together, and there are still more roads to travel." Brian smiled, stroked the dog's ear, and replied softly, "Yes, my partner. We'll always be side by side." In that moment, within the stillness of an autumn afternoon, the friendship and connection between man and dog became clearer than ever. This peace was not just a reward for surviving hardship. It was the foundation for the journeys and missions yet to come. In the days following the rescue, the atmosphere in Coldwater became filled with life and hope. The children who had once been trapped in the abandoned mansion now began the long journey of healing, both physically and emotionally. Their small, anxious faces slowly gave way to faint yet determined smiles like wildflowers pushing through after the storm. Brian often stood outside the care center where doctors and nurses tended to them with tireless devotion. He watched every step of their recovery, the fading of wounds, the softening of dark memories, and above all, the rekindling of trust in their young hearts. Support came not only from medical teams, but also from the entire Coldwater community. Schools opened their doors to welcome the children back. Social organizations hosted activities, games, and special classes to help them readjust to normal life. In every gesture, word, and act of kindness, the spirit of solidarity and compassion spread warmly across the town. Brian visited often, listening to the children's little stories, their sparkling smiles, and even the tears of joy that came with freedom. Together with Otto, he became a steady anchor, a companion who helped them step out from the shadows of the past and toward a brighter future. The journey of recovery was not only about healing physical wounds, but also about overcoming the deep unseen scars in their hearts. Brian knew that each child carried invisible pain and fear, so he worked with psychologists and the community to create safe spaces. Places where the children could share, be heard, and be loved unconditionally. Group talks and activities became bridges connecting the children to each other and to the outside world. Slowly, Brian saw them open their hearts again, learning to trust, to live, and to laugh. Faith in life was reborn like the soft light of dawn breaking through thick storm clouds. Through their stories, Brian found a profound lesson about life and compassion. That no matter how many trials life brings, and no matter how heavy the darkness, love and empathy remain the forces that can lead people through every hardship. And in that journey, every small act of kindness, every word of encouragement became a brick in the foundation of a brighter future. The Coldwater community learned that care does not end with rescue. It must continue in steadfast support so each person can truly find themselves again. Tireless efforts wove a strong network of protection, bringing hope and trust back to the lives of those young souls. One day, in a small ceremony at the community center, Brian stood among friends, colleagues, and the families of the children. His eyes reflected pride and emotion. He knew this was not just the end of a tragic story. It was the beginning of a new journey, one of life, trust, and kindness. Otto lay quietly beside him, amber eyes glowing with unwavering loyalty and eternal friendship. Together they looked ahead toward the challenges that still awaited, but this time with the strength of love and unity. That morning, golden sunlight broke through drifting clouds, casting a warm glow over the wide-open space at the heart of Coldwater. The old decaying mansion, once a place of shadows and secrets, was gone. Its rotting wooden walls, moss-covered roof, and rusted door had been dismantled, leaving room for open air and new life. In its place, the town was building a memorial park with winding stone paths, lush green lawns, and rows of young trees carefully tended. It was more than a park. It was a symbol of renewal, a place where Coldwater could remember both the pain and the hope born from those dark days. At the center stood a large plaque of honor engraved with the words, "In memory of the courage and loyalty of Detective Brian Carter and German Shepherd Otto, who brought light to the darkness and saved 23 young lives." In the sunlight, the plaque gleamed like a lasting reminder of friendship, bravery, and perseverance. Families came with their children, telling them the story of that miraculous rescue, teaching them lessons about compassion and the power of standing together. Flowers were placed before the plaque, silent thanks whispered in the hearts of all who visited. From a quiet corner of the park, Brian looked at the plaque while Otto sat by his side, his tail wagging slowly, his face calm after all the storms they had weathered. Brian silently thanked his four-legged friend, the partner who had guided him through the harshest trials. Though that rescue mission had ended, Brian knew challenges would never truly disappear. Coldwater still had shadows that needed light and stories yet to be written. He and Otto would continue forward, ready for new missions and untraveled roads. One gentle afternoon, as the breeze moved through the trees, Brian and Otto walked the park's winding paths. He glanced toward the space where the mansion once stood, a place that had been a monument to suffering, now only a memory. His heart filled with trust in the future, a belief that light and life would always prevail. The story of Brian and Otto did not end here. It opened a new chapter, one of courage, boundless loyalty, and faith in the good that lies ahead. New challenges awaited, but with their friendship and strength, Brian and Otto would continue to be a guiding light for those lost in the dark. The tale of Brian and his German Shepherd, Otto, stands as a lasting reminder of the power of love, loyalty, and the special bond between humans and animals. In rescuing the children from the shadows, Otto was not only a faithful companion, he became a symbol of perseverance and bravery. The German Shepherd breed, with its unmatched intelligence and protective instinct, proves that these dogs are far more than pets. They are friends, partners, and silent heroes, capable of saving entire worlds. This story carries the message that loving animals is not just about care. It is about understanding empathy and honoring the values they embody. The actions of Brian and Otto are a lesson in patience, responsibility, and compassion. Virtues we all need to face life's challenges. They have taught us that we must keep seeking light in the darkness, and that unity and sharing can create the strength to change the world. So let us treasure and love the four-legged friends around us, for they bring joy, inspire us, and may one day be the silent heroes of our own lives. The story of Otto and Brian will echo on, reminding us that love and loyalty are the light that guides every heart.